My name is Dennis Levin. I'm retired pastor here at Queen Street United Methodist Church in downtown Kinston, North Carolina. Welcome to our Wesley Bible class. And today we're going to be going over chapters 3 and hopefully 4. 4 is a short chapter. But we're in a time of transition. We're in a time when Saul and Jonathan and some of his other boys got killed in a battle, left the field open for what's going to happen with the monarchy in Israel and in Judah. There is a distinct difference between Israel and Judah. But we're going to see what David does and what's going on militarily, politically, and all the rest. So let's kind of get into it. This is chapter 3 of 2 Samuel. Now, understand that there is a general who is in the northern kingdom, and that's Ishbaal is the king. He's the son of Saul. The general is named Abner. We've already had an issue between Abner and Joab, who is David's general. Abner killed Joab's brother. Joab ain't happy about it. Okay, so we'll see what takes place as a result of all of this. There was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David. David grew stronger and stronger while the house of Saul became weaker and weaker. So what's happened is David is now king of Judah, which is the southern tribe, and he's got Judah alone. Remember that the last thing we knew about David before he went over to Hebron in Judah is that he was in Philistine territory. And the Philistine king thought that David was his ally. So he was saying, you know, what a friend we have in Judah. But David is in Judah, and all the other tribes belong to Ishbaal up north. Okay? Most of the battles with the Philistines are taking place up north. There doesn't seem to be a lot of animosity between Judah and Philistia. So the northern territories have been and still are quite vulnerable to Philistine incursions. But what's taking place now is that there are battles taking place between Ishbaal and Judah. And the reason why these battles are taking place is that just like Saul, Ishbaal knows that David is the promised king. Okay? So he considers David to be a threat to the throne. So David, I think David really wants to be king of everything, very much. So there are wars that are going on, and this weakens both the north and the south in the face of an external threat. Not a good recipe, okay? Sons were born to David at Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon of Ahinoam of Jezreel. Remember, Ammon is the crown prince under David, firstborn son. Okay, all these things become big issues later on. His second son was Chileab of Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel, and the third was Absalom of Maacah. Okay, now Absalom's going to figure pretty big later on also. He was son of Maacah, daughter of the king of Talmai of Geshur, and I'm not sure where Geshur is. The fourth was Adonijah, son of Haggith. The fifth was Shephatiah, son of Abital, and the sixth was Ithream of David's wife Eglah. So you see, David's been picking up a few wives along the way. All right? These were born to David in Hebron. While there was war between the house of Saul and the house of David, Abner was making himself strong in the house of Saul. Now, Saul had a concubine. This is a sex slave in his household. Okay, she is property. Wives are property also, but not in the same context. Okay, there's a marriage and wives The other ones are just purchased. So she's a concubine whose name was Rizpah, daughter of Aiah. And Ishbaal said to Abner, "Why have you gone into my father's concubine?" Well, that's not a good accusation, okay? She's not a wife of Saul, so she's not royal, but she is royal property. So if somebody claims royal property, then that's like being a pretender to the throne. Abner is getting stronger, Ishbaal is getting weaker. Ishbaal sees Abner as a threat, and when the rumor comes in that Abner has diddled with a concubine of Saul's, then that's a threat to the throne. That's why Ishbaal is concerned. The words of Ishbaal made Abner very angry, and he said, "Am I a dog's head of Judah, for Judah? Today I keep showing loyalty to the house of your father Saul, to his brothers and to his friends, and have not given you into the hand of David. Yet you charge me now with a crime concerning this woman. So may God do to Abner, and so may he add to it. For just what the Lord has sworn to David, that will I accomplish for him, to transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and set up the throne of David over Israel and over Judah, from Dan to Beersheba." And Ishbaal could not answer Abner another word because he feared him. And did Abner say, "No, I didn't"? Abner did not say, "No, I didn't." Okay? So we don't know if the rumor is true or not. But nonetheless, Abner's had it with Ishbaal. He knows he's working for, you know how it is when sometimes you're working for somebody who is inept? Abner is working for somebody who is inept. Okay? I can think of any number of presidents for whom I would wish not to be a general. I've had some commanders that I didn't even want to be a lieutenant for. So, okay. Abner sent messengers to David where he was saying, "To whom does the land belong? Make your covenant with me, and I will give you my support to bring all Israel over to you." So now he's a traitor. Totally a traitor. Okay? He said, "Good. I will make a covenant with you, but one thing I require of you, you shall never appear in my presence unless you bring Saul's daughter Michal when you come to see me." Now, why is that a big deal? Anybody remember Michal? Saul's daughter?
David after he killed Goliath.
But he did never marry her because she married somebody else.
That's right. But she was betrothed. There was a contract. Okay? And the contract was that David would marry her. And Saul broke the contract and married her off to some other guy. So David never forgot that. Okay?
Are 25 wives not enough for him?
I met a Saudi sergeant who had 5 wives. He said, "How many wives do you have?" I said, "I have 1." He said, "I have 5." I said, "Why?"
Poor man.
How could that be a good thing? You know? So, all right. So anyway, then David sent messengers to Saul's son Ishbaal, saying, "Give me my wife Michal, to whom I became engaged at the price of 100 foreskins of the Philistines." Well, there's a decent price, you would think. Okay. Ishbaal sent and took her from her husband Paltiel, the son of Laish, but her husband went with her, weeping as he walked behind her all the way to Bahurim. Then Abner said to him, "Go back home." So he went back. I'm sure there might have been something about that conversation. He made him an offer that he couldn't refuse. So
Yeah, but it doesn't even make sense to me because it makes it sound like he loved her.
he did.
He probably had a lot of wives. All of them had lots of wives.
No, I'm talking about
I
the
know that, but doesn't he probably
Michal?
have, I know, but is this his only wife?
Well, not only is this his only wife, but she's kind of a link to, if there's a gap in the throne,
Maybe so.
you
yeah.
know, there is that thing. So he feels like, you know, this isn't good. And by the way, this is a huge insult to the man. Huge insult. Okay? So,
Well, it strikes me that he's falling behind crime. That's what a woman does.
yeah, he doesn't look like he's a very strong guy, but, you know, anyway.
Yeah, and how the Jews had degraded from the early times when God had set out these plans. Don't marry out of the Jewish clan. And now, you know, they've gone to this where if somebody's taken somebody's wife, just give it to another guy.
I'm watching.
I mean, Jews are on a slippery slope.
It is. Yeah. And aside, I've been watching some of the arguments that are going on between Christians and Muslims, and one of the arguments has to do with why do they have so many wives and how do Christians only have one? So one of them asked the question: when God created Adam and Eve, did He create 5 Eves or 1 Eve? What was God's original plan? 1 guy, 1 woman. Okay, and then you know, that was reiterated in the New Testament as well. 1 on 1, not 1 on many. Either way.
Their Quran would say the same thing that ours does about Adam and Eve, though.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they've ignored that part.
You know, Muslims ignore parts and so do the Christians. So.
There are, well, yeah, I may have ignored some from time to time, but not that. Okay, Abner sent word to the elders of Israel saying, for some time past you have been seeking David as king over you. Now then bring it about, for the Lord has promised David. Though through my servant David I will save my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and from all their enemies. Abner also spoke directly to the Benjaminites. Then Benjamin is right next to Judah. Okay, just north of Judah. Then Abner went to tell David at Hebron all that Israel and the whole house of Benjamin were ready to do. All right, so what's going on here? You don't have a democracy, per se, okay? But the lords of Israel have a vote. And they're voting to depose Ishmael. Okay, they don't say it explicitly, but they are saying that we'd rather David was the king than Ishmael. And, you know, from their standpoint, if things are not going well in Israel, if Ishmael is a bad administrator, if the people feel insecure, if the lords of Israel don't feel like Ishmael is worth defending, then, you know, they're going to depose him. This is the problem. This is one of the problems with monarchy. And by the way, you're beginning to see these kinds of things play out now in like Russia, where Putin is like a czar. He really is. He's like a czar. And his oligarchs that he's set up are either doing things to undermine him, or they're somehow disappearing, or they're falling out of high windows. So something's going on in Russia right now that's very similar to this. I don't know that they have an heir apparent, but they certainly don't like the guy they've got. And this is the issue with Ishmael. They don't like the guy they've got. Okay, and David has a much better rep than the guy they've got.
So back then, they were still somewhat tribal.
Oh, they were very tribal.
Okay.
Very tribal. Okay. If you were the king, you really didn't want to mess with your tribes. Okay. And it wasn't that the people had a vote in this. It was the warlords that were in charge of them. Those are the guys you did not want to make angry. When Abner came with 20 men to David at Hebron, David made a feast for Abner and the men who were with him. Abner said to David, let me go and rally all Israel to my lord the king, in order that they may make covenant with you, and that you may reign over all that your heart desires. So David dismissed Arab, and he went away in peace. Now understand, Abner is an enemy. He is a former enemy. Okay, so now he is a traitor, and he's coming over to David. Joab and all the army that was with him came. He was told Joab, Abner son of Ner came to the king, and he dismissed him, and he has gone away in peace. Make Joab happy. Then Joab went to the king and said, what have you done? Abner came to you? Why did you dismiss him so that he got away? You know that Abner son of Ner came to deceive you and to learn your comings and goings and to learn all that you were doing. So he's basically saying, Abner is a traitor, why would you trust him to be loyal? Okay, but he also has a thing about Abner. When Joab came out from David's presence, he sent messengers after Arab, and they brought him back from the cistern of Sarah, but David did not know about it. When Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside in the gateway to speak with him privately, and there he stabbed him in the stomach, which is not a kind thing to do. So he died on account of the blood of Asahel, Joab's brother. Afterward, when David heard of it, he said, I and my kingdom are forever guiltless before the Lord for the blood of Abner son of Ner. May the blood guilt fall on the head of Joab and on all his father's house, and may the house of Joab never be without one who has discharge, that's an illness, okay, an infection, or one who has a defiling skin disease, which would be leprosy, or who holds a spindle, I don't get that one, or who falls by the sword or who lacks food. So Joab and his brother Abishai murdered Abner because he had killed their brother Asahel in the battle at Gibeon. All right, now here's the deal. If there is a murder that takes place, we are pretty familiar with the laws that govern murders. You have an avenger who is supposed to be able to go after the murderer. An avenger comes from the family of the person who was murdered, okay? But even back then, there was a law of war. And if someone is killed in battle, it is not murder, okay? Now understand, this is important for people who say, well, you know, the Ten Commandments says thou shalt not kill. No, the Ten Commandments said thou shalt not murder. Okay? So if there is a war and someone kills somebody else in a war, they are guiltless for the blood unless they have violated some rule of war. And in this case, they definitely have. Okay? Joab is killing as if this had been a murder and not a battle casualty. Now, I think it's really important that we understand why they have that rule. They have that rule because at some point, hopefully, there will be some kind of peace between the two combatants. Okay? And if there's going to be peace between the two combatants, you can't have these blood feuds going on with the peace, where you have peace between governments, but blood feuds going on between the former combatants. Okay? So what they do is they put the kibosh on the blood feuds so that diplomacy can work. That's basically why they have that rule. Okay? Joab has violated that. David curses Joab and his family, which is kind of interesting because Joab has committed a murder, but David doesn't murder him. Okay? Joab, by the way, is I think David's uncle. All right. Then David said to Joab and to all the people who were with him, tear your clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourn over Abner. And King David followed the bier, and they buried Abner at Hebron. The king lifted up his voice and wept at the grave of Abner, and all the people wept. The king lamented for Abner, saying, should Abner die as a fool dies? Your hands were not bound, your feet were not fettered. As one falls before the wicked, you have fallen. So what he's saying is that Joab not only killed him, but Joab doesn't have any integrity. He didn't even fight with him. You know, He just up and stabbed him, acting like he was going to be at peace with him, and he just ups. It's a murder, okay? And all the people wept over him again. Then all the people came to persuade David to eat something while it was still day. But David swore, saying, "So may God do to me and more if I taste bread or anything else before the sun goes down." All the people took notice of it, and it pleased them, just as everything the king did pleased all the people. So all the people in all Israel understood that day that the king had no part in the killing of Abner, son of Ner. And the king said to his servants, "Do you not know that a prince and a great man has fallen this day in Israel? Today I am powerless, even though anointed king. These men, these sons of Zeruiah, are too violent for me. The Lord pay back the one who does wickedly in accordance with his wickedness." Okay, so another curse on Joab. All right, what's going on? Well, Abner has already laid the groundwork for the lords of Israel to come over to David's side. If they think that David was part of this plot, they're not going to come over. So David is doing everything he can to convince them that I had nothing to do with this. All right? I don't think he does enough. Joab's still his top dog. Okay? He doesn't demote him. He doesn't execute him. He's completely undermined this whole diplomatic negotiation. You see what's been going on between us and Iran? They think they come to a deal, and then all of a sudden somebody screws it up from Iran's side. Oh, we have a peace treaty, or we've got a ceasefire, and all of a sudden they start blowing up ships and stuff. They can't control what's going on, and they can't control their own people, and it makes it impossible to negotiate. Okay, David is saying, this happened, I didn't approve of it, and we can still negotiate.
Yeah, this is all political.
It is.
I mean, look at all what David did. I mean, when the Nabal, who would not give him food, so he was going to go kill everybody in her family.
Yes.
And what's the difference in that and this? I mean, Joab was avenging the murder or the killing of his brother. And yet, David's all against Joab, who was his leader, led all the battle. It's all political. David is trying to, exactly what you say, he's trying to negotiate the merger of Israel and Judah.
Right.
So, I mean, all this bellowing is fake in my mind.
Well, it is fake. As far as I'm concerned, David didn't have much of a moral compass to begin with. He has a goal, and if he can achieve the goal without having to go to battle with all these warlords, so much the better. Okay? What would David do to these warlords if he was in battle? I think that he would probably execute the warlords. Okay? That was his style. David was, pretty genocidal in the way he went about things. I don't think that he personally was terribly upset with Joab, other than the fact that Joab acted outside of orders. And that David was in the middle of something and Joab was undermining. I think those are the things that really made him mad. The moral issue here, I don't think really bothered him a whole lot, because while he has all these verbal curses and everything, what does he do to Joab? Not him. Okay, get in sackcloth and ashes and say you're sorry. Duh. Okay. If that's all you want, Okay, let's get into chapter 4, because it's not long. When Saul's son Ishmael heard that Abner had died at Hebron, his courage failed and all Israel was dismayed. Saul's son had 2 captains of raiding bands. The name of one was Baanah, and the name of the other was Rechab. They were sons of Ramon, a Benjaminite from Be'eroth, for Be'eroth is considered to belong to Benjamin. Now the people of Be'eroth had fled to Gittaim, and are there as residents to this day. I don't know if they are residents to this day, but back then they were. Okay. Saul's son Jonathan had a son who was crippled in his feet. He was 5 years old when the news came about Saul, and Jonathan came from Jezreel. His nurse picked him up and fled, and in her haste to flee, it happened that he fell and became lame. His name was Mephibosheth. And we're going to hear more about Mephibosheth later, okay? But if Ishbaal somehow doesn't survive, okay, the next person in line to Saul's throne is Mephibosheth. Just bear that in the back of your head, because we're going to see that later. Now the sons of Ramon, the Beerothite, and Rechab and Baanah set out, and about in the heat of the day they came to the house of Ishbaal. He trusts them. They were his guys. While he was taking his noonday rest, they came inside the house as though to take wheat, and they struck him in the stomach. It seems to be a favorite place. Okay? Then Rechab and his brother Baanah escaped. Now they came into the house while he was lying on his couch in his bedchamber. They attacked him, killed him, and beheaded him. They took his head and traveled by way of Arabah all night long. They brought the head of Ishbaal to David at Hebron and said to the king, "Here is the head of Ishbaal, son of Saul, your enemy who sought your life. The Lord has avenged my lord the king this day on Saul and on his offspring." Now, what did David promise to Saul?
He would spare his family.
He would spare his family. Okay, so even if he overthrew Ishbaal, he was honor bound not to kill him. All right, so these guys up and kill him. Why is it important that this story be noted? It's noted because David didn't want to be accused of violating his vow. And actually, he didn't want anybody else to violate his vow. So here's what happens. David answered Rechab and his brother Baanah, the sons of Ramon the Beerothite, "As the Lord lives, who has redeemed my life out of every adversity, when the one who told me, 'See, Saul is dead,' thought he was bringing good news, I seized him and killed him at Ziklag. This was the reward I gave him for his news. How much more then, when wicked men have killed a righteous man in his bed in his own house, and shall I not require his blood at your hand and destroy you from the earth?" So David commanded the young men, and they killed them and cut off their hands and feet and hung their bodies beside the pool of Hebron. But the head of Ishbaal they took and buried in the tomb of Abner at Hebron. So they gave him a decent funeral. But he's telling the lords of Israel, "I didn't have anything to do with this. Look what I did to the people who killed your king." Okay? There are very few places where David really doesn't want to claim blood guilt. Okay? He's very happy to kill people all the time, but he doesn't want to be accused of going back on his word. Okay? And he still wants the support of the lords of Israel. Now, what this does, of course, is it opens the door even more for them to come over to David's side, because they don't have a king. Okay? The only one that might be the king is Mephibosheth, who's lame and very young. Okay? So he's not a likely candidate to take over the throne of Ishbaal. But he's still in line. All right? So we're going to see, what transpires from there. We all know that David becomes king of all Israel. Okay? And then what happens after that is just a bunch of really interesting stories. This guy, David is a royal soap opera. So we're going to see a lot of stuff happening. But come back and check with us. Oh, by the way, I'm not going to be here next week. I'm going to be preaching in my old parish back in Aden. And I don't know if even that's online. So probably not. It is online?
Yeah, it should be recorded and then we'll post it around Tuesday.
Oh, okay. Okay. And by the way, I've had a few editing issues with YouTube, so this thing may show up a little bit later in the afternoon. I'm hoping I can get this thing on right away, but as soon as I'm done with one of these things, I've got to edit it and go from, I've already set it to be public, but it switches over to private automatically, I don't know why. And then I've got to make it public again. And once it's public, it publishes again. So if it's a little bit late, I apologize for that, but I just haven't got the system down yet. Talk to you in a couple of weeks.